The howling wind cut through Margaret's wedding dress like knives of ice. At 42, she stood abandoned in the Montana Territory blizzard of 1878, left to die by a man who had deemed her past her prime. Snowflakes accumulated on her shoulders as darkness fell and temperatures plummeted below freezing. Her fingers had already lost sensation, and each labored breath formed crystalline clouds that dissipated into the whiteout conditions surrounding her. Have you ever felt the sting of rejection based on something you couldn't control? The cruel judgment of others who see only your age, not your worth. This is a story about finding value in unexpected places, and how sometimes, being abandoned is the first step toward being truly found. If this resonates with you, hit that like button and subscribe to join our community of storytellers and truth seekers. Now, let me take you back to a time when a woman's worth was measured by youth and fertility, and how one remarkable woman changed that narrative forever. The Montana Territory of 1878 was unforgiving to everyone, but especially to women alone. Margaret knew this as the wind howled around her, yet something within her refused to surrender to despair. She had survived loss before. She would survive this too, if only she could find shelter before the cold claimed her completely. Margaret had been a respected schoolteacher in Boston until influenza claimed her husband 3 years earlier. Their modest home, once filled with intellectual discussions and shared dreams, fell silent except for her solitary footsteps. With no children and dwindling finances, her options narrowed in a society that offered few paths for widows approaching middle age. The letters from William Harrison began arriving 6 months after she placed an advertisement in a matrimonial newspaper, a decision that had cost her many sleepless nights of doubt. "I seek a companion of good character and practical skills," he wrote in elegant penmanship that suggested education. "Someone to share in building a legacy on fertile Montana land, where the sky stretches endlessly and opportunity awaits those with courage to claim it." His subsequent letters described his homestead with such vivid detail that Margaret could almost smell the pine forests and feel the mountain air. He wrote of needing a woman's sensible touch and the companionship of an educated mind during the long winter evenings. What he never specified was his expectation of youth, an omission that would prove devastating. Margaret sold her remaining possessions, purchased a train ticket west, and packed her trunk with practical items, except for one indulgence, a simple but elegant wedding dress of ivory silk with modest lace trim. It represented not frivolity but hope, tangible proof of her belief in new beginnings. After weeks of travel by train and then stagecoach, each mile taking her further from everything familiar, Margaret changed into the dress at the final stop. The other female passengers helped with her buttons and offered encouraging smiles tinged with envy for her romantic adventure. None suspected the reception that awaited. The stagecoach rattled to a stop at the remote Montana outpost, little more than a way station, general store, and telegraph office clustered around a muddy thoroughfare. Margaret stepped down, smoothing her dress with gloved hands, heart pounding with anticipation. The tall man waiting by a wagon studied her with narrowing eyes, his expression shifting from expectation to disappointment to something harder. "You're Margaret Harrington." William Harrison's voice carried none of the warmth from his letters. It was flat, cold, assessing. "Yes, Mr. Harrison. I'm so pleased to finally." "How old are you?" he interrupted, circling her like a predator assessing prey. His gaze was invasive, calculating, as though mentally subtracting value with each perceived flaw. 42, as I mentioned in my third letter, Margaret replied, confusion creeping into her voice. She had been forthright in their correspondence, believing honesty the foundation of any potential partnership. William spat on the ground, the gesture deliberate and demeaning. "You're much older than you appeared in that photograph. I can't be saddled with someone your age. You'll be sickly before long, and I need someone who can work the land and bear children." His words struck like physical blows. Margaret's spine stiffened as she fought to maintain dignity. "Sir, I believe there has been a misunderstanding. I never misrepresented." "No misunderstanding," he cut her off again. "I need a young wife, not a nursemaid to my old age. You've wasted both our time." Without another word, he climbed onto his wagon, turned it around, and drove away, leaving Margaret with nothing but her trunk and the wedding dress now collecting dust from the departing stagecoach. The station master witnessed the exchange from the doorway of his office. His expression held uncomfortable sympathy mixed with resignation, as though such scenes were not entirely uncommon in this harsh territory. "Sorry, ma'am," he offered awkwardly. "Harrison's got a reputation for being particular. Last coach east won't come through for 2 weeks. There's a boarding house in town, but it's 8 miles north." Margaret nodded mechanically, dignity preventing her from revealing the full extent of her predicament, that William Harrison had been her only prospect, that her funds were nearly depleted after the journey, that she knew no one in this vast territory. Then the snow began, light flurries that quickly intensified into blinding sheets of white. The station master frowned at the sky. "Storm's coming faster than expected. You'd best stay here tonight. Can offer you the storeroom floor." But Margaret knew waiting meant depleting what little money remained. With determination born of necessity, she asked directions to the nearest settlement, wrapped her traveling cloak tightly around her wedding dress, and began walking, following the stagecoach tracks before they disappeared under fresh snow. The temperature dropped rapidly as daylight faded. Her fingers lost feeling first, then her toes. The wedding dress, soaked through with snow, dragged like an anchor against her legs. Each step became a negotiation with her body to continue. The wind found every opening in her clothing, stealing warmth with methodical precision. Margaret's thoughts turned to her late husband. "I'm sorry, Robert," she whispered through cracked lips. "I tried to be practical, to secure a future." The irony wasn't lost on her, that in trying to avoid becoming a burden to others in her advancing years, she now faced dying alone in a frozen wasteland. Just as her resolve began to crack, Margaret spotted it, a faint golden light in the distance, barely visible through the curtain of snow. New determination surged through her frozen limbs as she altered course toward that promise of warmth. The light wavered, sometimes disappearing completely when the snow intensified, but Margaret fixed it in her mind like a compass point. The wedding dress caught on unseen obstacles beneath the snow, tearing in places as she struggled forward. The symbolism wasn't subtle, her hopes for a conventional future shredding with each step toward an unknown light. Yet something within Margaret had awakened during this ordeal, a fierce will to survive that transcended her societal training in propriety and dependence. The light belonged to a small trading post at the edge of Cherokee territory, a sturdy log structure with smoke curling from its stone chimney. As Margaret's numb hand raised to knock, her strength finally abandoned her. She collapsed against the rough-hewn door just as it swung open. A tall figure stood silhouetted against the warm glow of a fire. Swift Hawk, respected elder of his band of Cherokee who had managed to avoid the forced relocations decades earlier, looked down at the half-frozen woman in white. His face, etched with 60 years of experience, revealed nothing of his thoughts as he assessed the unexpected visitor. "Come," was all he said, his deep voice barely audible above the storm. The single word contained neither judgment nor excessive compassion, simply acknowledgement of another human in need. Margaret tried to speak, to explain her presence, but her frozen lips formed only incoherent sounds. Darkness edged her vision as the contrast between the bitter cold and sudden proximity to warmth overwhelmed her system. With surprising gentleness for his large frame, Swift Hawk helped Margaret inside. He wrapped her in a buffalo hide and positioned her near the fire, maintaining a respectful distance while ensuring her survival. No questions, no judgment, just quiet efficiency that spoke of a lifetime of weathering storms both literal and figurative. The trading post was modest but well organized. Shelves lined with goods for trade, furs, tools, preserved foods, beadwork, and practical implements, surrounded a central hearth. A young Cherokee woman worked quietly in the background, occasionally glancing at the strange white woman in the wedding dress but following Swift Hawk's lead in offering help without intrusion. "Drink," Swift Hawk said, offering a wooden cup filled with a steaming liquid that smelled of herbs and honey. When Margaret's trembling hands couldn't hold it, he supported the cup but let her control the sipping, a small dignity that registered even through her disorientation. For 3 days, the blizzard raged without mercy, trapping them in the trading post. For 3 days, Swift Hawk tended to Margaret with careful attention. He spoke little, but when he did, his words carried the weight of mountains. The young woman, whom Margaret learned was Swift Hawk's niece Willow Song, helped her out of the ruined wedding dress and into simple buckskin clothing. They hung the dress near the fire, though both women knew it would never be the same, the delicate silk permanently damaged by ice and rough handling. Margaret drifted in and out of consciousness that first night, her body fighting to recover from the near-fatal exposure. She woke once to find Swift Hawk placing another log on the fire, his movements deliberate and quiet to avoid disturbing her rest. Their eyes met briefly across the flames, and something in his steady gaze anchored her to the present when fever threatened to pull her into delirium. If you're finding value in this story, take a moment to hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to be reminded of their worth today. On the second evening, as Margaret sipped broth from a wooden bowl, Swift Hawk broke his customary silence. He sat across from her, carving a small piece of wood with practiced motions, his eyes occasionally lifting to study her with quiet intensity. "The white man who left you," he said, his eyes fixed on the dancing flames, "he sees with blind eyes." Margaret looked up, startled by his directness. She had not told him about William Harrison or the circumstances that led her to his door. Yet something in his tone suggested not guesswork but observation, as though her story was written in her posture, her expressions, the way she held herself despite her ordeal. "Your hands show strength," he continued, nodding toward her fingers as they clutched the cup. "Your eyes show courage. These are things that do not fade with seasons." Margaret studied her hands, the small calluses from years of teaching, the slight bend in her right index finger from a childhood break, the wedding band she still wore from her first marriage. For the first time, she saw them not as markers of age but as testament to a life fully lived. "Where I come from," she said carefully, "a woman's value often ends with her youth." Swift Hawk nodded slowly, his carving knife pausing in its work. "Many of my people were forced from their homes because others did not value their ways. Value is given by those who have wisdom to see it." The simplicity and depth of his statement struck Margaret profoundly. She had spent months agonizing over her diminishing prospects, internalizing society's judgment that a woman of her age had little to offer. Yet this man, from an entirely different culture, saw strength where others saw only limitation. "How did you avoid the relocations?" she asked, genuinely curious about his presence in Montana when most Cherokee had been forced to Indian Territory years before. A shadow passed over Swift Hawk's features. "Our band was in these mountains before white government drew their maps. We moved with the seasons, stayed hidden when soldiers came. Lost many, but some remained." His knife resumed its rhythmic movement against the wood. "Now we live between worlds. Trade with settlers, keep to old ways when possible." Margaret nodded, understanding something about living between worlds herself, no longer young enough to be valued in traditional roles, yet not old enough to be respected for wisdom. A liminal space that society had no category for. As the storm cleared on the fourth day, Margaret expected to be directed toward the nearest white settlement. Instead, Swift Hawk offered her a choice that would alter the course of her life. "My sister's daughter runs the trading post," he explained, gesturing to Willow Song. "She needs help with the counting and writing. The winter is long. You could stay until spring." The offer was practical, not romantic, a chance to heal, to contribute, to find her footing in this harsh new world. Margaret considered her alternatives, attempting to reach the distant town with depleted resources, or accepting this unexpected opportunity. "I was a teacher in Boston," she said. "I can keep accounts and correspondence." Swift Hawk nodded once, matter settled. "Willow Song will show you our ways." That afternoon, Margaret began learning the trading post's systems. Willow Song, though initially reserved, proved to be an astute businesswoman with an impressive memory for inventory and customer preferences. She spoke English well but appreciated Margaret's attempts to learn basic Cherokee phrases. "My uncle says you have a good spirit," Willow Song told her as they catalogued a new shipment of goods. He does not say such things lightly. Winter melted into spring, and spring blossomed into summer. Margaret learned the rhythms of the trading post, the language of commerce between two worlds. She kept the books with the precision of her teaching background, organized inventory, and gradually mastered enough Cherokee to converse with customers who spoke little English. Her presence brought unexpected benefits. More white settlers felt comfortable trading at a post where a white woman worked, increasing business. Meanwhile, Margaret created fair pricing systems that earned trust from both communities. She introduced a ledger system that tracked credit accurately, preventing the misunderstandings that often led to conflict. Willow Song taught her which local plants could be used for medicine, food, and dyes. Margaret absorbed this knowledge eagerly, recognizing its value beyond any formal education she had received. In return, she taught Willow Song advanced mathematics and writing techniques that improved their business communications with distant suppliers. Swift Hawk visited often, bringing herbs for medicine or game from his hunts. Their conversations grew longer, their silences more comfortable. He never touched her beyond what propriety allowed, but his eyes followed her movements with appreciation that had nothing to do with youth and everything to do with the woman she had become. "My people believe that wisdom comes with time," he told her one evening as they sat outside watching the sunset paint the mountains in gold and purple. "That beauty deepens like river cutting through stone. Slow, patient, powerful." Margaret felt something unfurl within her chest, not the desperate flutter of a young girl's heart, but the steady warmth of recognition. Of being truly seen. "In Boston, they would call me an old maid now," she admitted. "Here, I feel as though I'm just beginning to understand who I truly am." Swift Hawk nodded. The oak does not apologize to the sapling. It stands tall, provides shelter, holds wisdom in its rings. As summer progressed, Margaret found herself watching for Swift Hawk's visits with increasing anticipation. Their conversations ranged from practical matters of the trading post to philosophical discussions about their different cultures. He listened to her descriptions of Boston with genuine interest, asking questions that revealed a keen intelligence and curiosity about the wider world. "Your cities sound like ant hills," he observed after she described the crowded streets and tall buildings. "Many people, always hurrying, never seeing the sky." "There is beauty there too," Margaret defended, though with a smile. "Libraries with thousands of books, music that can make your heart soar, art that captures moments of perfect beauty." Swift Hawk considered this. Perhaps all people seek beauty, just in different places. He gestured toward the mountains. "This is my library. The wind in pines is my music. The changing seasons are my art." Margaret found herself nodding. "I understand that better now than I ever could have before." When autumn painted the hills in gold and crimson, a group of settlers came through, bringing news and mail. Among the letters was one addressed to Margaret, forwarded from the stagecoach station where she had left her trunk months before. The letter bore the official seal of a law office in Helena. Margaret opened it with trembling fingers, conscious of Swift Hawk's watchful presence nearby. "William Harrison is dead," she said after reading the contents twice to ensure she understood correctly. "Pneumonia took him 3 weeks after we met." Swift Hawk remained silent, allowing her space to process this unexpected news. "His brother writes that I could still claim the land," Margaret continued, her voice tight with conflicting emotions. "As we had a written agreement to marry. The brother feels responsible for William's poor judgment and wishes to make amends." Swift Hawk's face remained impassive, but his eyes darkened like storm clouds. "What will you do?" Margaret looked around at the trading post that had become home, at the man whose quiet strength had helped her rebuild herself. "I'm not sure the land is mine by right," she said slowly. "But perhaps it could be put to good use." The letter contained additional information that complicated matters. William Harrison's land was significant, 160 acres with water access and timber rights. His brother, a lawyer in Helena, had included documentation that would support Margaret's claim under the Homestead Act provisions for widows and single women. There was also mention of making financial arrangements that suggested compensation beyond the land itself. This could be a new beginning, Margaret mused, but not the one William Harrison envisioned. If you're invested in Margaret's decision, take a moment to hit that subscribe button. This story reminds us that our greatest challenges often lead to our most meaningful opportunities. Together, they devised a plan that would honor both justice and opportunity. Margaret would claim the land, then establish it as neutral trading ground, a place where Cherokee and settlers could meet in peace. Swift Hawk would advise on its management, ensuring his people were treated fairly. The land was Cherokee hunting ground before white men claimed it, Swift Hawk acknowledged, his finger tracing ancient paths on the crude map. Perhaps now it can be a place where both peoples find value. Margaret nodded. A place of second chances. For the land and for people. The plan took shape over several evenings of discussion. Willow Song contributed practical insights about which goods were most needed by both communities. They identified the strategic location of Harrison's claim, positioned between the main settlement and several smaller Cherokee encampments, with access to a year-round stream and the main trail. We will need to build trust slowly, Margaret cautioned. There will be resistance from both sides. Swift Hawk agreed. Trust grows like oak, not corn. Slow but strong. The journey to claim the land was not easy. Margaret faced skepticism from government officials who questioned both her right to the claim and her sanity for wanting it. The land office clerk in Helena initially refused to process her paperwork, suggesting she find a husband to handle such matters. Margaret stood her ground. The Homestead Act specifically allows single women to file claims, she stated firmly, placing the relevant legal text before him. And I have documentation of my prior agreement with Mr. Harrison, endorsed by his brother. With the support of William's brother, who felt guilt over his siblings' actions, she secured the deed after 3 tense days of bureaucratic resistance. The lawyer also provided a modest sum to help establish the new venture, calling it conscience money, that his brother would never have offered. Construction began before the first snow, with Swift Hawk organizing a work party of Cherokee men skilled in building. Margaret hired several white laborers from the settlement, creating an uneasy but productive mixed work crew. The structure took shape rapidly, larger than the original trading post, with separate areas for different types of goods and a central meeting space with a large hearth. Their partnership raised eyebrows on both sides. A white woman and a Cherokee elder, working together without the bonds of marriage, defied convention. Rumors spread through both communities, some suggesting impropriety, others questioning loyalties. They say you've forgotten your own kind, a white settler told Margaret bluntly during construction. That you've gone native. And what kind would that be? Margaret replied calmly. The kind that abandoned me to die in a blizzard, or the kind that saved my life and offered me purpose? The man had no ready answer. From the Cherokee side came different concerns. The white woman brings white ways, an elder warned Swift Hawk. Soon more will come, pushing us further into shadows. This woman brings balance, Swift Hawk countered. She stands between worlds as we must learn to do if our children are to survive. By midwinter, the new trading post was operational. Margaret implemented a system where goods could be exchanged for currency, labor, or other goods, allowing people from all backgrounds to trade with dignity. Swift Hawk's wisdom guided their interactions with the Cherokee, while Margaret's education helped navigate the increasingly complex legal landscape of the territory. Together, they created something neither could have achieved alone, a neutral ground where different cultures could interact with mutual respect. The success of their venture spoke louder than any rumors, gradually silencing critics as economic benefits became apparent to both communities. You have built a bridge between worlds, a Cherokee woman told Margaret one day as they completed a trade for beautifully tanned deerskin. My grandmother says you have the spirit of one who listens before speaking. Margaret considered this the highest compliment she had ever received. It reflected not the superficial attributes that William Harrison had found lacking, but the deeper qualities she had developed through adversity and openness to a different way of seeing. As winter approached again, Margaret stood on the porch of the trading post, watching the first snowflakes dance on the wind. The anniversary of her abandonment approached, but the memory had lost its sting. She touched the wooden post supporting the roof, solid, real, tangible proof of what she had helped create. Swift Hawk joined her, his shoulder nearly touching hers. They had developed a language of proximity over the months, communicating through presence rather than unnecessary words. "The snow comes again," he observed. "Yes," Margaret replied, no longer fearing the cold. "But this time, I'm not alone." Swift Hawk turned to her, his weathered hand reaching slowly for hers. The gesture was deliberate, significant, the first time he had initiated such contact outside of practical necessity. "You were never meant to be alone," he said. "Some people are like certain plants that only show their strength after the frost." Their fingers intertwined, bridging cultures, ages, and expectations. The touch was simple yet profound, acknowledgement of a connection that had grown naturally, without force or pretense. Their love wasn't the passionate blaze of youth but the steady, warming fire of mutual respect and understanding, a love that had grown not despite their years but because of them. Margaret thought of the girl she had been in Boston, proper, constrained, afraid of stepping outside society's narrow expectations. That version of herself could never have imagined standing hand in hand with a Cherokee elder, building a life that defied categorization. Yet here she stood, more fully herself than she had ever been. "The first snow last year nearly took my life," she said softly. "Now it feels like a beginning." Swift Hawk nodded. "Nature teaches us. Death and life are not separate. One follows the other, always." Through the winter months, their relationship deepened. Margaret spent evenings learning beadwork from the women of Swift Hawk's extended family. Her fingers, once awkward with the tiny beads, gradually developed skill and artistry. The repetitive motion became meditative, allowing conversations to flow naturally among the women. "Your pattern shows balance," observed Silver Moon, an elderly woman whose eyesight remained sharp despite her advanced years. "Not perfect, but honest." Margaret examined her work, a geometric design of mountains against sky. The lines weren't as straight as those created by the Cherokee women, but they had a distinctive character. "I started too late to master this fully," she admitted. Silver Moon clicked her tongue disapprovingly. "Never too late for new learning. My grandmother began dancing at 70 winters. Became known for her grace." This perspective, that life continued to offer opportunities for growth regardless of age, contrasted sharply with Margaret's upbringing. In Boston, women her age were expected to settle into supporting roles, their own development considered complete or irrelevant. "You create beauty," Swift Hawk observed later, watching her work on a pattern of mountains and stars. "I had a good teacher," Margaret replied, glancing at Silver Moon who had patiently guided her. "Not just in beadwork," he said. "You create beauty in how you treat others, in how you build this place of peace." Silver Moon nodded approvingly. "She has learned to see with more than eyes." Margaret felt a sense of belonging she had never experienced before, not as a teacher in Boston, not as a wife in her previous marriage. Here, among people who valued wisdom and experience, she had found her true home. The trading post thrived through winter. Word spread about fair prices and respectful treatment, bringing customers from further distances. Margaret's accounting system proved its worth when a dispute arose over a large transaction, her detailed records resolving the matter before it could escalate into the kind of conflict that often sparked violence in the territory. Swift Hawk's presence deterred those who might have tried to take advantage of a business run by a woman. His reputation for fairness and quiet strength extended beyond his own people, earning respect from even the most prejudiced settlers who came to trade. In the spring of 1879, they married in a ceremony that honored both their traditions. The decision came naturally, without grand proposals or dramatic declarations. They had built a partnership based on mutual respect that had gradually blossomed into love, a mature, steady love that neither needed to proclaim loudly nor justify to others. Margaret wore a dress of soft buckskin adorned with beadwork she had crafted herself, a pattern of snowflakes transforming into flowers, symbolizing her journey. Swift Hawk wore his finest ceremonial attire, his silver-streaked hair bound with an eagle feather that had belonged to his father. The ceremony took place at dawn, with members of both communities bearing witness. A Christian minister who had become a regular customer at the trading post spoke words of commitment, followed by a Cherokee blessing of the union. They exchanged simple bands of silver, engraved with patterns that represented their respective heritages now joined as one. "Two rivers becoming one," Swift Hawk said as he placed the ring on Margaret's finger. "Flowing stronger together," she responded, completing their vows. The celebration lasted all day, with food and customs from both cultures shared freely. Children played games together while elders from both communities exchanged stories. For one day, at least, the divisions that typically separated their worlds dissolved. Not everyone approved. Several white families refused to attend, and some Cherokee elders maintained a skeptical distance. Yet the majority came, curious if nothing else, and many left with new perspectives on what was possible when prejudice was set aside. "Never seen anything like it," commented a grizzled trapper to his companion. "Cherokee and white, breaking bread together like it's natural." "Maybe it is natural," his friend replied thoughtfully. "Maybe it's all the fighting that ain't." The trading post became officially known as Widow's Redemption, a name that acknowledged Margaret's past while celebrating her present. The sign, carved by Swift Hawk himself, became a landmark for travelers seeking fair trade and safe haven. The name carried multiple meanings. For Margaret, it represented her personal redemption from abandonment and despair. For Swift Hawk, it honored the strength he had recognized in her from their first encounter. For the communities they served, it came to symbolize second chances and new possibilities. As word spread of the unusual partnership between a white widow and a Cherokee elder, curiosity brought more visitors. Some came expecting to find scandal or exploitation. Instead, they discovered a thriving business built on mutual respect and shared purpose. "We don't just trade goods here," Margaret explained to a skeptical government inspector who had been sent to investigate complaints about improper relations between communities. "We trade ideas, skills, and understanding." The inspector, who had arrived prepared to find fault, left with a new perspective, and a report that helped protect the trading post from those who might have sought to undermine it. His official recommendation noted the stabilizing influence of the establishment on regional relations and its contribution to peaceful commerce. This official recognition provided a measure of protection, though challenges continued. Land speculators eyed the increasingly valuable property. Religious missionaries questioned the propriety of the mixed cultural practices. Political changes in the territory brought new regulations designed to separate communities rather than unite them. Through it all, Margaret and Swift Hawk maintained their vision. They adapted when necessary, stood firm when essential, and continued building bridges where others erected walls. If this story of transformation speaks to you, please take a moment to like and share it with others who might need this message of hope and redemption. As their influence grew, Margaret and Swift Hawk expanded their vision. A small school was added to the trading post, where children from both communities could learn together. Margaret returned to her teaching roots, while Swift Hawk shared traditional knowledge and skills. The school began modestly, just a corner of the trading post where Margaret worked with 5 children whose parents were progressive enough to embrace the experiment. She taught reading, writing, and arithmetic, while Swift Hawk instructed them in practical skills like tracking, identifying plants, and understanding weather patterns. "Education is the bridge to understanding," Margaret told parents who questioned the mixed classroom. "And understanding is the path to peace." The curriculum evolved to include both Western knowledge and Cherokee wisdom. Children learned to write English while also learning Cherokee words and concepts. They studied American history alongside Cherokee oral traditions. Mathematics included both formal equations and practical applications in trading, building, and navigation. "My son now corrects my figures when we trade," laughed a white farmer who had initially opposed the school. "And yesterday he identified a healing plant when my wife cut her hand. Can't argue with results like that." Not everyone approved. There were threats and boycotts from hardliners on both sides. The Territorial Education Authority questioned the legitimacy of a school that didn't separate students by race. Religious leaders objected to the inclusion of Cherokee spiritual concepts alongside Christian teachings. Yet for every person who turned away, two more seemed to arrive, drawn by the promise of a different way forward. Parents who wanted their children prepared for a changing world recognized the advantage of an education that bridged cultures rather than enforcing separation. The school grew, eventually requiring its own building adjacent to the trading post. Margaret hired additional teachers, including Willow Song, who had developed into a gifted instructor with a special talent for helping children understand complex concepts through practical application. Swift Hawk took particular pride in teaching the children about the natural world. "They must know the land to love it," he explained. "And they must love it to protect it." Margaret watched him with the children, patient, respectful, treating even the youngest with dignity. His approach to teaching mirrored how he had treated her from the beginning, seeing potential rather than limitation, strength rather than vulnerability. Years passed, and Widow's Redemption grew from a trading post into a small settlement where people of mixed heritage could live without constant judgment. Children of Cherokee and European descent played together, learning both traditions. Elders were valued for their wisdom rather than dismissed for their age. Margaret and Swift Hawk's influence extended beyond their immediate community. Visitors from other territories came to observe their model of cooperation. Government officials studying the Indian question consulted them about alternatives to forced assimilation or isolation. Their approach didn't solve all problems, but it demonstrated possibilities that challenged prevailing assumptions about inevitable conflict. Their personal relationship deepened with time. The passion of youth might have been absent, but in its place grew something more enduring, a partnership of equals who continued to discover new dimensions in each other. They disagreed at times, their cultural backgrounds occasionally leading to misunderstandings, but they had developed the patience to work through differences rather than allow them to create division. "We are like two trees that grew separately for many years," Swift Hawk observed on their 10th anniversary. "Now our roots intertwine underground, even though our branches reach in different directions." Margaret nodded, appreciating the metaphor. "And we're stronger for having grown separately first. We brought fully formed selves to this union." As they aged, their roles evolved. Younger people took over the day-to-day operations of the trading post and school, while Margaret and Swift Hawk focused on mentoring and resolving more complex disputes. Their home became a gathering place where difficult conversations between communities could happen in an atmosphere of mutual respect. When Margaret passed away at 84, surrounded by Swift Hawk and 3 generations of their blended family, her legacy was not measured in youth or beauty, but in lives transformed. The woman once deemed past her prime had helped create a community that valued people for their character and contributions rather than superficial attributes or cultural background. Swift Hawk followed her 2 winters later, having planted trees that would shade generations he would never meet. At his passing ceremony, Cherokee elders and white ministers stood side by side, honoring a man who had walked between worlds with dignity and purpose. Their graves sit side by side on a hill overlooking the community they built, marked by a single headstone carved with both their names and a simple phrase in Cherokee and English, "Value deepens like rivers cutting through stone." The settlement they founded continued long after they were gone, evolving with changing times but maintaining its core principle, that human worth transcends age, gender, and cultural background. In a region often torn by conflict, Widow's Redemption remained a testament to what becomes possible when people recognize the value in those society has deemed expendable. Years later, when Montana achieved statehood, historians would note the unusual community as an example of cooperation that defied the more common narrative of conflict. Anthropologists would study its unique blending of traditions. Educators would examine its innovative approaches to cross-cultural learning. But perhaps the most meaningful legacy was in the lives of ordinary people who found acceptance there, women considered too old by society's standards, mixed-heritage children who belonged fully to neither world, elders whose wisdom might otherwise have been dismissed, individuals seeking second chances after failure or loss. For them, the story of Margaret and Swift Hawk wasn't just history, it was living proof that being abandoned in a blizzard could be the beginning, not the end, of discovering one's true worth. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel for more tales of courage, redemption, and unexpected love. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever discovered your worth in the eyes of someone who truly saw you? Your story matters too.